Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my theological review for A Nightmare on Elm. It's Krueger! Oh, just a dream. Oh, just a...
It was so easy. Little custom-built latex walls, and you're all crapping in your short pants.
Happy Halloween and welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk theological review for A Nightmare on Elm Street 1984. Cody Leach, this one is for you. Before I dive into this review, I should definitely let you know I have never seen any of these movies before, and now the only one I've seen is the 1984 Nightmare on Elm Street. I haven't seen anything else. So as I bring up some of these ideas and some of the questions that came up as I was watching this movie, if they are answered in the sequels, I haven't yet seen them. Cody Leach is telling me I absolutely need to see them and continue to review them and all that stuff. And you know what? That might happen because Cody Leach does not steer me wrong. But this is me doing this review off of seeing the 1984 movie for the very first time and having not seen the sequels. I think in the end, I'm gonna give it a B-. It's above average for me. I'm not in a hurry though to go back and rewatch it anytime too soon, but I am curious. Like, I do wanna see Freddy's Revenge. I do wanna check out these other sequels and see what more they do with this. But as a standalone movie by itself, I did enjoy this movie. It was kind of freaky. I wouldn't say that this movie was scary, but it definitely was very trippy, and I think it did a good job portraying a freaky concept that we can all relate to. Because I think everybody watching this video, myself included, we've all had nightmares. And we've had those nightmares where inside the nightmare, we know it's a dream, but we can't wake up. And I think we've all had those nightmares where the monster or whatever it is chasing us. And trying to get away from it, it's like we're running through molasses. I think this movie does a good job, especially with the practical effects and the stuff they had in the 80s, of portraying that feeling that we can all relate to from having those nightmares. Because, I mean, Freddy is just an already scary monster, but when you have those scenes where, like, Nancy's trying to run up the stairs and her feet go through the stair and it's like that slime and she's struggling to get her foot out while Freddy breaks the glass in the door and he's kind of just taking his sweet old time and she's, like, running through molasses in this sense, quite literally just trying to get up the stairs. I think it's something that we can all relate to. That scene where she falls asleep in class and she's like, this is just a dream! Who can't relate to that? It's a dream, and she's telling herself it's a dream, but it's not stopping the monster, and it's not waking her up until she burns herself on the pipe and absolutely wakes herself up screaming in class. We've all had those bad dreams where it's just like, okay, now I don't want to go back to sleep. Because have you ever noticed this? When you're having the best dream of your life and you wake up, it's like, oh crap! And then you try to go back to sleep and continue that dream, and no matter what you do, you can't get back to the good dream. But if you have the worst nightmare ever, you wake up, you get a glass of warm milk or water or something, you go back to bed, and boom, it's like you pick up right where you left off. It's like, what is that? So it does a good job playing on that fear of actually going back to sleep and kind of how that impacts you in real life. Because in the beginning, really before all this Freddy stuff like takes full steam, like even with Tina, when her mom was leaving town for Vegas for a few days, she couldn't bear the idea of being alone in her house just because of the creepiness of that dream that opens the movie. And so it does a good job, I think, playing on all of those typical feelings that we've had around bad dreams and nightmares. But I think what takes this whole thing next level is it goes beyond just that. Because when Nancy goes to wake herself up and she hits that pipe with her arm and it burns her arm, when she wakes up, she finds an actual burn on her arm. You know, you have that whole freaky scene with Tina, and here she is on the ceiling and screaming and bloody and all of that stuff. The knife wounds are appearing on her out of thin air, out of absolutely nowhere, but it's because it's what's happening to her in the nightmare. And what's happening to her in the nightmare is actually happening in the real world and waking life. Only nobody else can see Freddy, but it's actually physically impacting her. And I think that's one of the things that makes this movie such a classic, because it does a great job playing on that typical relatable fear that we could all have concerning nightmares, but then it takes what is the scariest part of our nightmare and brings it into the waking world, which actually takes real life and the real world and turns it into a waking nightmare. So throughout this movie, you look at Nancy, and it's like you can visibly see her age as she's sleeping less and less and less. You're seeing that tiredness really affect her. And you're seeing throughout the movie, as more and more stuff begins to impact the real world starts to feel like that molasses because she's so tired trying to run from this bad guy and trying to run from Freddy. It's like running through that molasses, both in her dream and in reality. And so I think the movie does a really good job of taking that feeling out of the dream and putting it in the real world. So even as you're watching the movie and you're seeing her look more and more tired, more and more worn out, and even looking older and older as the movie goes, like the white streak of hair in her, like all of that, they just do a good job of keeping the fear and the nightmare feeling going. And you're guessing it a lot of times, like, wait, are you asleep now or are you awake now? There is a real killer about. There are actual murders happening. And the police, and Nancy's dad being one of the main officers, you know, they're doing their best. They're doing what they can. But who's ever heard of the killer only existing in dreams? It's ridiculous. I don't know that I would believe it if some teenager came up and told me that story. So of course they're going to arrest Rod. He was in the same room as Tina when she had that horrible, brutal death and murder, even though they can't even find the murder weapon. The only logical explanation is it must be Rod. They were fighting before that, so it's gotta be. So they arrest him, they put him in jail. And then you have Nancy, who tries to have Johnny Depp,
I'm Captain Jack Sparrow,
you know, stand guard as she goes into the dream world. And in her dream there she sees Freddy Krueger coming into Rod's cell. So when she wakes up from that horrible nightmare and she comes running to the jail, she goes, I need to see Rod. It's like, what, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, whatever time it is. She's like, please, I need to see that he's okay. And while they're arguing in the lobby about, you know, letting her back there, here's Rod asleep, probably having a nightmare. I don't know. I mean, he's not thrashing about, but yet the bed sheets are turning into a noose and wrapping around his neck, and he's actually murdered. This is a bad guy that easily gets behind locked doors, leaves zero evidence because it's a killer killing in the dreams, bringing it into our world and just making it all that much more frightening. Which, speaking of bringing things into reality, one of the scenes that I thought was really cool is when they take Nancy to that sleep clinic. On the one hand, when she starts freaking out and the doctor's looking at those readings, he's like, I've never seen readings like these. I wanted to see the dream. Like, there's this part of me that wanted to know what was going on in that dream. But also, it was cooler not seeing the dream and just kind of seeing what everybody else awake sees, how she's freaking out. And it's like, you know, how could this ever be real? It's truly, honestly, a nightmare. So all of a sudden, one bit of her hair is streaked completely white, and she pulls out Freddy Krueger's hat because in the dream, she grabbed it off his head. They woke her up, and holding onto his hat in the dream, she brought it into reality. So yeah, it's a nightmare. Yes, everybody awake can clearly see she's asleep, she's there, she's just having a bad dream. But there is something deeper going on here, and she brought his hat out into reality. I thought that was a well-done scene.
He can't get you now. He's dead, honey, because Mommy killed him. I even took his knives.
And I like how they get into the origins of Freddy Krueger, because in talking about his origins, they don't really answer anything. They make everything even more scary through the mystery of it. I mean, the fact that Freddy Krueger was a child murderer, and he got out of prison because somebody signed the warrant in the wrong place, so all the parents who were fearful and angry found the place where he would take all the kids and kill them, and they burned him alive or burned the whole place down with him in it.
Then lit the whole thing up and watched it burn.
Somehow, though, he is now alive in people's dreams. And so in this particular movie, that remains the mystery. So we do get an origin, but just enough of an origin that it makes everything else the mystery, which is what makes him a true nightmare. He's based in reality, he's affecting reality. How is he in the dreams affecting reality? I will say some of the funny things when I'm watching this movie is, first off, young Johnny Depp.
I'm Captain Jack Sparrow.
I watched it twice in one day. I watched it once when my wife was at work. She got home and I had to play this movie for her. And both of us, like, couldn't even recognize Johnny Depp. We knew it was him. We could see the those typical Johnny Depp features, but it was like, at first it's like, are you sure that's Johnny Depp? Is that really Johnny Depp? I saw introducing Johnny Depp in the credits, and it took probably the first 10 minutes of his screen time for me to realize, oh, that's Johnny. Seriously, wow. So it's crazy to see, like, this is his first movie and to see him so young. The other thing that's kind of funny to me is it's just like this for me with all horror movies. Why are you following demonic voices alone into the dark? I mean, Tina has already had a horrible nightmare, right? So let's set the stage. Tina already had a bad nightmare. That's why Tina is having this sleepover, because she's scared to be alone and her mom has left town. And then she falls asleep, and so granted, yes, it's a dream. We all do crazy things in the dream, but the point is even in her conscious and subconscious, people are in this house because she's scared to be alone. Yet, in this dream, a demonic voice is whispering her name.
Who do you think you are?
And she follows the voice outside into her yard, into the dark, where you have Freddy and his crazy long hugging arms.
Can I have a hug?
No,
Give me a hug.
no way.
Come here.
I'm not coming over there.
Let's go.
Forget it.
And so here she is following a demonic voice out into the dark alone, when the whole reason she's having this sleepover is so that she wouldn't do something like that. And I'm watching this, I'm like, why? Why in these horror films do they follow the demonic voice out into the dark all alone? I can never wrap my head around that or understand that. My wife and I watch a lot of horror movies, and when we do, we're like, why aren't you turning on the lights? Every time you enter a room, your first thought should be, flip on the light switch. And to me, this is like one of those moments, it's like, why are you following him out there? But what makes me laugh even more is the Home Alone traps. So when she's trying to, come up with her plan of grabbing hold of Freddy in her dream, waking up and pulling him out into the real world so that her dad can arrest him, and she's setting up the booby traps around the house. And when Freddy starts to go through those traps, I'm sorry, all I could think is Home Alone.
What if they meet a monster in their dreams? Then what?
They turn their back on it, take away its energy, and it disappears.
Now, this is a very interesting concept that this movie brings up, this concept of dream skills. So you're having that nightmare like you're falling, and you go, all right, I'm just going to decide to fall into a magical world. Or you see a monster in your dream, you turn your back on it and stop giving it energy that makes it bigger and stronger. And when you really look at that, that's exactly what Freddy's doing. He is this spirit of fear that is rising up in their dreams. Now, look how slow he's always attacking. And look how much he always seems to be playing with his food, cutting off his fingers, making funny faces. The whole point of all of that is to get them to look at him and magnify him and make him this huge, large thing that occupies their minds. And the more they fear him, the stronger he gets, because they are giving him more and more energy. It's interesting because this concept, you can find it in the Bible. Like when Peter said, if you really are Jesus, let me walk out on the water with you, because they thought Jesus was a ghost walking out on the water. And Jesus said, come out here. And so Peter steps out and walks on the water. But when his eyes were on Jesus, Jesus was magnified. And so when that's where his faith was and that's where his eyes were, then he was walking above the chaos of that water. But then the moment those waves caught his attention and he was focusing on those waves, all the chaos and the storm and the waves, that began to magnify in his mind, and he went under the water. But Jesus was right there and caught him and brought him up. It's like, oh, you have little faith. And it's funny because when you look at that, Jesus says, truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. A lot of times we do the exact reverse. Rather than saying to our mountains, be removed, we say to God, my mountain is so huge. What we're doing is we're magnifying the mountain and not magnifying God. What I love about what Jesus is saying here is he's not telling us to ignore reality and facts. What he's telling us is we can face reality with confidence and faith because God is so much bigger than anything we could ever face, and he loves us. Freddy Krueger was a real force in their lives. It was something huge and scary. Now, when Tina turned her back on it, she just wasn't covering it up and ignoring Freddy's existence. No, she realized the truth, and she quit feeding him energy. She quit feeding him her fear, and he lost his ability to hurt her. It's interesting because she realized who he was, and she realized his schemes.
It's too late, Krueger. I know the secret now. This is just a dream.
Here she had entered this dream thinking she was going to grab a hold of Freddy and pull him into reality. But then she realized the whole thing that she's going through right now is a dream. And so she just turned her back on him, and he lost his ability to harm her. And that's what the enemy wants to do in our lives. He wants our focus so on him that he could overcome us and defeat us like those waves overcame Peter.
Please, God.
This is God.
What Jesus wants is for us to put our eyes on him, so like Peter, we can walk on that water. We ain't denying that there's water being churned up, but rather than being consumed by it, we're being consumed by him, and we can walk out on that water.
I take back every bit of energy I gave you. You're nothing.
But then it feels like the ending kind of undoes that entire concept, because like, where did the dream begin? Did it begin when she set her stopwatch and closed her eyes in bed? I don't think so. It had to have begun much earlier, because it seems that Freddy can really only torment her in her dreams. So when she's trying to tell Johnny Depp, stay awake until midnight, and Johnny, clearly seeing that his girlfriend is in distress, that this is incredibly important to her,
I just asked you to do one thing.
so that Freddy can then pull him into the bed, and he turns into that scene from The Shining.
I may have deserved that.
You're a teenager, staying up till 2 in the morning isn't that hard. Point is, I feel like the dream started somewhere around there, because even though we don't actually see her fall asleep, when her phone rings and it's the scary Freddy noise, that's Freddy tormenting her, right? And he can only torment her in the dreams. She unplugs her phone or really rips the wire out of the wall, destroying the wire, and the phone rings again. And then Freddy, like, French kisses her through the phone. But here is Freddy tormenting her. Further evidence is the fact that, you know, she wants to set up that deal with her dad, come break down the door in 20 minutes because she's going to pull Freddy out of her dream. And then somehow it only takes her 10 minutes to set up all of the booby traps, say goodbye to her mom, set her watch, and go to bed. Are you... It takes way longer than 10 minutes to set up those type of booby traps. But that's also evidence to me that that's a dream, because we all know time doesn't quite work the same inside of a dream. And then Freddy goes through all of those booby traps because she supposedly brought him into our world, and yet it turns out that was all part of the dream. So we didn't actually see her fall asleep earlier, and this whole thing must be the dream.
This whole thing is just a dream.
So does it mean this whole sequence here at the end, where she steps out of her bedroom and into the light of a beautiful day, and she's looking young and rested and no gray in her hair, and her mom's gonna quit drinking, and everything's happy, all of her friends are alive, but then it turns out the car is somehow Freddy and has a mind of its own and drives off with them in it, and then Freddy reaches through the little window of the door and pulls the mom right through like a pop balloon or something weird. It was weird. The point is how much of that was a dream at the end? Where did the dream actually start? I really liked this concept that her turning her back on Freddy and refusing to give him that fear and give him that energy made him this mountain that would just crumble and fall, that she could move because she quit putting all of her faith and all of her fear into how big he was. I'm like, well, that's a very interesting concept. And then we have this ending, which, you know, it's not like it's the worst ending ever, but I'm trying to figure out, do I like this ending or do I not like this ending? So I'm like, I'm kind of in the middle of that. And maybe that's part of why I'm giving this a B- instead of like a B or a B+ or something, because it's like, you're setting up something very cool and you set up a very cool way for her to be able to defeat Freddy, and then instantly, that's just not there, and it's all a dream. Now, again, I haven't seen the sequels. I don't know if they get into this deeper, if they explain this more. I have no idea. So I'll have to go check out those sequels sometime here in the near future. But that's where I'm at right now, having only seen this 1984 classic for the first time. So what did you think? Do you like that ending? Do you agree with my grade, or would you go higher or lower? Let's talk about that in the comments. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button to become a Durbanian, and hit that bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.